Next on our agenda is the action agenda. First item on the action agenda, I'll accept a motion for item 3A. Mr. Cates.
I move we give approval to selected employment items, Exhibit A, item 3A on the agenda.
Ms. Hammond seconds that. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed, that passes 6-0. That is all that's on our executive session. We will move to item number 14, and that is the second and final reading of proposed revisions to board policy GBEC, drug and alcohol-free schools and workplace, GBEC-E, notice to employees. Do I have a motion? Is there a motion? Mr. Cates.
I move we give second and final reading to proposed revisions to policy GBEC, drug and alcohol-free school workplace, and GBEC-E, notice to employees, is found in Exhibit D.
Is there a second? Ms. Gardner seconds. Is there any discussion? Yes, Mr. Lovelace.
Superintendent Melton, I wondered if, as you can tell, there's a family reason for this, but I wondered if we could explore. I know our policy does not state in there exactly how we're going to test, which is, I understand that. But I wonder if we could explore what the cost and what the ramifications of having the hair follicle test, having pre-employment event, for cause reasons, and random drug testing and so forth. If we could at least explore that and bring that back to us at another time. I mean, I appreciate that the policy goes to what it does, and I know that that this board and you were the drivers behind that, and I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we do everything that we can to not have a problem like that. And that was painful for my brother to come up here. I know you know that, but he strongly believes in that. I'm trying to act on the best advice that I think we have. And I've checked this out with insurance companies. They're having a strong policy not only prevents things from happening, but it also can give us, and I'm not an expert on how finances of insurance goes to schools, but I think that having a strong policy and having the things in there would mean dividends to us, not only from psychological or doing the right thing, but also financially. And I can tell you that from anecdotal experience, having 33 years in the construction business, that when people know that you're going to do that kind of testing, they don't come to work for you or even try it because they know that you're going to find out what's going on. And not that there aren't, anybody that has a legally prescribed, or prescription from a doctor, that they're going to be excluded from this. But, what I'm saying is that this is illicit drugs and anybody that knows that you're going to test like that, they're going somewhere else. I think we ought to set the example for the state, and that's my soapbox. So thank you.
Ms. Hammond.
Am I on? Can you hear me?
I think so.
I agree with that, and I remember the explanations we got a few months back when we were first looking at this. But I think it could be a deterrent, and I do think we could at least let Dr. Melton see what other districts, if there are any others that do this, what is the cost. And, it could be just random, so it may not necessarily be It's not infringing on people that we're testing every single person. But I think just the thought that we were a leader in the drug war would say a lot for how we value student life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Seeing none, then we have a motion and a second to approve the drug and alcohol-free school and workplace and notice to employees. All in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed, and that passes 6-0. Thank you. Next is our first reading of proposed revisions to Board Policy IHAE, Physical Education. If we could have a motion, and then we can, I believe this is one that was carried over from last week.
So
Okay,
this is first reading.
right. So if we could have a motion, then we can have a presentation. Yes, Ms. Hammond?
I move that we approve or have first reading of proposed revisions to Board Policy IHAE, Physical Education, as in Exhibit E.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Cates seconds. Okay. Would, Mr. Giuliano, were you the one to present to us on this? Thank you.
I am, thank you. On January 28th, the school board approved an application for us to take to the State Department of Education to begin offering band with physical education. Once that was approved here, we took it to the State Department of Education for approval. They have since approved that. So now we're going back to make sure that we update policy to make those changes associated with that change to band with physical education. So we'll notice in Exhibit E, if I could draw your attention to Exhibit E. Within this policy IHAE, Physical Education, you'll notice the section that's in blue. Marching band may be substituted for physical education if the instruction incorporates the South Carolina academic standards for physical education. The committee that was put together and wrote the plan that was submitted to the state did make sure that the South Carolina academic standards for physical education were within that plan, and that was approved by the State Department of Education, thus the change to the policy that you see here. With that, I'll open it up to any questions that we may have.
Did the board members have any questions about this?
Can I
Yes, Ms.
ask-
Hammond.
May I ask one, not about the band, but just a general one about physical education? Do we have a certain number of hours determined by the State Department that even our middle or high school kids have, or it's only elementary?
So they have a law that's in place that pertains to elementary and middle school as well. And then, of course, they have the requirement for graduation credit for high school.
High school, okay. And then as far as with the marching band, I know we discussed this, it's been a while back, but we had a lot of support from parents for this change?
From the parents that we heard, there was support for their children, just to give them that option within their schedule, because
Right,
some
because-
students' schedules were very crowded, and
Right.
they wanted to have the ability to be able to take some elective courses that they so choose.
That's what I remembered. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. We have a motion on the floor to give first reading approval of Board Policy IHAE, Physical Education. All in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed, that passes 6-0. Next is first reading of proposed revisions to Board Policy IKF, Graduation Requirements. If I could get a motion, please. Mr. Cates.
I move we give first reading approval to policy IKF, graduation requirements.
Okay, Mr. Lovelace seconds that. Mr. Giuliano, is this you?
It is, thank you.
Okay.
If I could draw your attention to Exhibit F, you're going to notice one change in blue to this policy, IKF, graduation requirements. And this change is based upon School Boards Association model policy, which is also a change that's being made by the state of South Carolina. For that section that's in blue, I'm going to highlight one portion of that, and that this is a chance for endorsements, and maybe in the form of a seal that's added to a student's uniform diploma. And they earn a graduation endorsement, the student's program of study must meet certain criteria that the State Department of Education will determine. This is going to begin for the 1920 school year. The State Department is still working on a plan to give school districts, but we're getting policy in line and ready to make sure that we're in place for this that's taken place for our students in the 1920 school year. So at this time, those guidelines that are mentioned, we currently don't have yet, but according to the meetings that we've been to, the State Department is working on those, and we'll have them for us as the school year begins in the 1920 school year. With that, I'll open it to any questions we may have.
Okay, do we have any questions about this?
I have one.
Ms. Hammond?
You're using the word endorsement. Is that like a company?
It's not a company, but what it's going to be is a diploma pathway that will be
Yeah.
endorsed by the State Department of Education. So it will be, we're not sure what the form will be. It could be a certificate on there. It could be a seal. The State Department is still determining exactly what that's going to look like specifically, but it will not be a company that necessarily endorses.
Well, how's this different than, when we have graduation, they have the different colors around them, the white, if they're honor graduates or whatever. How is this different, and what's the purpose?
The purpose is to make sure that students have the opportunity to be able to go within a pathway that could earn a seal that employers may look at
Okay.
or may be looked at certainly by colleges as well.
That's what I was trying to see. Did it mean they might get more money for college or be identified as, above average in a certain area? I'm just trying to get the purpose of it.
At this time, colleges may look for those seals, especially within some particular area,
Okay.
as more employable or more for their program of study that they're looking for as they go to enter college.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Lovelace?
Giuliani, I'm supposing that this is some, work keys would be one of these things that, is that right? Work keys like we have at our career and technical education?
Work Keys is an assessment that is given to our students through the State Department of Education. That's one of the required assessments. So Work Keys necessarily wouldn't be one of these seals of distinction, but once the State Department really determines what those seals are, then we'll have an opportunity for our students to be able to learn those through a program of study.
Okay, let's suppose that I had a student that went to our career and technical education and did mechanical engineering in there. Would that be one of the items, if he had chosen that path, so that when he went to apply for higher education or a job, that people would see he had the requisite knowledge to, in high school to do some of the things in mechanical engineering? Is that what we're talking about here?
That's pretty much what you're talking about, is they're
Okay.
going to have opportunities to go through a path of courses that would look well to employers or to colleges.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Gardner?
So you said we're waiting on the State Board of Education to sort of firm up what those guidelines will be, but do you feel that we already have these pathways in place that we'll just have to tweak them most likely? I mean, our high schools already have a myriad of ways to, my son's a senior, so I can tell you all the things but I know we don't know what they are yet, but is it going to be a whole new program setup type thing, or you think they already know what we're doing and they're going to try to make it?
Yeah.
I mean, do you have an example of something that you know that they probably will do?
That's a very good question. So within our course catalog, we have a lot of offerings right now. So to answer your question, we're not going to have to add many offerings to our courses. Fortunately, we have a lot of experts within our district that have been paying attention to what exactly has been taking place over the years to get us in line with what's going to take place here. So you hear a lot of times completers that we have in schools. We already have programs in place so we can make sure we have completers within different programs of study within our K courses and other areas such as that. So we're well in line with the areas that they're going to have, so we won't have to add a lot of changes or make a lot of changes. That's a very good question.
Mr. Case?
I appreciate your diplomacy. It appears we are just kind of ahead of the state, and that's why we probably have some specific questions that they haven't provided the answers yet. So we'll be well along when they finally say, okay, we're going to do a seal, or we're going to put a different color diploma, whatever they do, it sounds like you've been proactive and will have us ready to move forward. So I appreciate that, and I think the policy speaks well to what we need to do to be ready when the state decides what that's going to look like. So thank you for your leadership, and we look forward to them letting us know where we can fill in the blanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. What's the downside to this? What are the possible negatives to approving this policy or adding this seal?
I don't see a negative to adding the policy because it's going to be a requirement from the state. This will be options for our students to have. It'll be an extra way that our students can highlight themselves and put on their resume as they move forward. So it's a way for students to have another opportunity to have a certificate or a seal within whatever diploma pathway they take.
And will this be on their transcript as well?
That's what the indication is that they're given, that it would be on their transcript, and then they would have some type of seal or certificate to go along with that.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I have always thought that I like the idea of students trying different things too. And if they try health sciences and then decide that's not something they want, then they jump over to mechanical engineering. I'd like to see a seal that says you tried different things and tried different options.
Well-rounded.
Well-rounded, yeah.
A seal that says well-rounded.
I tell you what, I'd like to see that because it's, a lot of times we get students who come into college and I don't know what the stats are, but they're really high about students changing their major. And so I'd like to encourage students when it's not costing them an arm and a leg to try it in high school. So I'd kind of like to see a seal for people who are trying things. And I really am kind of serious. I know y'all are looking at me like, surely she's not saying that, but I do think there's a lot of merit to that. Yes, Dr. Melton.
Thank goodness people cannot see my foot shaking up here because these kinds of things are exciting, but also they create some local issues. Where did this come from? If you think about the profile of the South Carolina graduate, this is when all these conversations started. I remember this board having some serious discussions when it was time to look at a 7-point grading scale versus a 10-point grading scale. Many of you remember that conversation, whether you serve the role of a parent, a teacher, or a community member, or a board member. The endorsement issue, as Mr. Giuliano has very diplomatically shared with you all, is something that is coming from the state to make sure that our students can have the competitive opportunities. But remember, it's not just the college-bound students. Mr. Lovelace, you captured that with those that are career-bound. This is important for them to have an additional opportunity. But if you notice in that first paragraph, the last sentence, the actual end of the sentence, completing 120 hours of instruction in a given subject area, that's already there. So looking at what's been added to the policy in that blue, it's not an endorsement for requirement of graduation, but it is something that's going to complement so that students can have that specialization so that they can make sure that what they're going into is something they may be interested in. But that would be a downside, Ms. Hutchison. Those that go into this, they could avoid the opportunity to look towards other CTE programs or other things that may lead to an endorsement. I like to echo Mr. Giuliano said, we have so many people that are so reputable within their specialty and content that we have the opportunity to send in representatives to be on committees, and our folks, I'm fortunate to say, accept those opportunities. So often people think that teachers don't have voices, but we are sought. We have the opportunities, and we create the opportunities to create lead for people to go and participate with conversations just like this. So this is something that Mr. Giuliano, Dr. Gates, Dr. Slatton, and others will stay on top of because this too can affect students with special needs. So there are advantages, but there are also some constrictions that this could go towards for students that are working towards the graduation diploma, so that we may have to make some decisions of where do you really invest your energy of your selection of courses. And eventually what could happen is we could lead toward deleting some courses that are now out of date. From a business community standpoint, there may be celebration for that, but we know from a community standpoint, some parents like to make sure that their children have the experiences that they had when they were in high school. So the focus of this is to make sure that South Carolina stays competitive from an industrial standpoint, to make sure that kids are ready for the workforce, that we're not doing things that are out of date, but that we are making sure that the programs we're offering will have them vetted to be creatively, will have them successfully prepared to be competitive in the work environment. So hopefully that brings a little bit of political at a larger level than this local level frame for all of you, because this is, as Mr. Giuliano said, this is the Model Policy and School Boards Association working with the department and also working with our state legislature, that what's been crafted thus far is what we can say, but fortunately, it'll be implemented over time. We're not going to catch a rising senior and then be caught off guard, so this will have to start with a particular class of graduation, and when might that be? Hopefully that helps.
Any other questions? Might have raised more questions, but we'll save them. We'll save them to the next meeting. So we have a motion on the floor to give first reading approval of Board Policy IKF graduation requirements. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, and that passes 6-0. Last on our action agenda is first reading of proposed general fund budget fiscal year 2019-20. Can I have a motion from the floor? Mr. Cates.
I move we give first reading of proposed first reading approval of a proposed general fund budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 as found in Exhibit G.
Is there a second? Ms. Gardner seconds. All right, let's have the discussion, and I suppose, Mr. Richardson, you're going to lead this for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I will tell you that this will be the third time I've spoken to you about this budget, and I will tell you that this one probably looks a little better than the previous two. Of course, everything that we're talking about tonight is based on what the Senate Finance Committee approved on April 4th. I will tell you that the Senate has also approved their version of the Appropriations Act, and it is in the House's hands right now. Nothing much has changed as far as what I'm going to talk about to you, except for just a few things that I'll hit. One thing that on here that has changed since the last time we spoke is the appropriated base student cost, the very last item you see up there, the bullets. We're now implying that the base student cost will be $2,487. It was a little bit lower than that last time we spoke, and that is about $2 more than what we're receiving this year. Everything you see here in yellow is, or green, I'm a little colorblind, but whatever color that is, everything you see here is exactly the same in both versions of the budget. The roll-up of all the funds is happening in this version of the budget. There is a difference. They added an additional $15 million to EFA to increase the base student cost. Like I said, $2 more than we're currently receiving this year. There is a 4% salary increase for teachers mandated in this budget. They've increased the starting pay for a minimum on the state minimum salary schedule for a beginning teacher to $35,000. And of course, they've eliminated some technology funds, put money in for school safety officers, and unfortunately, we won't qualify for that. They've added $15 million to the capital improvement projects, of which that $15 million will be used to help pay for consolidation of small school districts. Also getting money for instructional materials again, and then school buses. In this budget, you will see that we have increased our South Carolina Retirement System employer contributions by 1%. We have actually lowered our estimate on what we think health and dental insurance premiums are going to go up by. We still don't have any information on that, but by talking around to a few other school districts, we've decided to lower that estimate. to approximately 2%. We had it at 7.4%. We also have the 4% cost of living adjustment in here for teachers, which is mandated. We also have it in here for all of the other district employees. All district employees that are eligible would also receive a step increase. Any staffing needs that we would need based on board policy or to increase the safety and well-being of our students is in this budget as well. We've also increased the budget for school resource officers to cover the cost of the increasing costs on that. We've got additional mental health services in this budget. We've had to add money for technology because everything seems to be going up in the world of technology. And we have not budgeted this year approximately $1.5 million for the non-recurring $500 loyalty bonus that we gave to all employees this current fiscal year. The additions, the budget now is increasing by $7,072,983, which is 3.75% increase. Most of these items that you see here are exactly what you've seen before, except for the last bullet there for what our catch-all is, salary increases, step increases, all that, is now $7.9 million. These are our new numbers going forward. As you can see from this, that approximately 88% of our budget is salaries and fringe, for a total of $195,794,553. This just graphically shows you how that breakdown is occurring. And the hard part, the general fund projected budget for revenues. We have gotten some more updated information. Like I said, we've got some more up-to-date information from the state, so we're able to give a little bit better projections there. And we've had a few more collections locally that has helped us hopefully make some more accurate projections on what our local revenue will be going forward. So right now we have our current taxes budgeted at $67,831,629. Penalties and interest, $277,000. None of these other numbers have changed, by the way, from the last version. Total local revenue is $70,558,225. Here's some of the state numbers that we've gotten, and like I said, we've had a little bit more up-to-date numbers. So these numbers total $118,986,515. The major differences you'll see here is we've got more money in the EFA due to what I just spoke about earlier with the increase to the base student cost. And we have gotten a little bit more state fringe benefits money showing here as opposed to what we had last reading of the budget. So our total funds available are $195,653,591. This just shows the breakdown graphically. So where are we? Here's where we are right now as of last week and as of where everything stands currently. We're have a difference between revenues and expenditures, $140,962, which I feel very good about at this point in time. I would tell you that in May, I should be in here with a balanced budget without any type of millage increase based on what we currently have in this budget. If we were to need a millage increase, this is what the allowable millage increase would be by law. I do want to mention these dates. Obviously, like I said, the Senate has already done their version of the budget. It is in the House right now. If the House non-concurs with what the Senate has sent them, a conference committee will be appointed, which will be 3 House members and 3 Senate members. They'll be charged with working out the difference between the 2 versions. They'd bring back a conference report to both bodies for approval. They would ratify it and then send it to the governor. The governor has 5 days, not including Sundays, to issue any vetoes. And then, of course, the General Assembly would have to come back to take up any vetoes. Right now, there's some talk about them coming back on Monday, May the 20th, but I'm not sure they would be able to take up any vetoes until later in June, probably, if they had to. And if they weren't anything that were that significant, they could wait till January. This is our calendar, our budget calendar, and obviously tonight we're at first reading. We plan to come forward in May with the final reading of this budget. I know I went through this very quickly because there's not many changes to it based on what you've seen and what we've talked about previously, but that concludes my report, but I'd be glad to take any questions that may be out there.
Okay, do we have any? Mr. Lovelace, I want to thank you also for sending these questions in. That really helped me to follow, and probably the rest of the board members to follow your questions, and also from Mr. Richardson to get the answers. So thank you very much.
Okay, most of that was focused around me understanding and you educating me, so you're an educator now. So.
That's scary, Mr. Lovelace.
Well, anyway, correct me if I'm wrong. I may have the wrong picture. I'm new at this, okay? But the last time we met, there was a $4,200,000 deficit.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we've overcome that deficit, and we've added $7,073,000.
Is the increase in our budget for the current year, over the current year, excuse me.
Okay, so we've overcome basically what you're telling us with updated numbers from revenues, that you've overcome the $4,200,000, or have we cut programs to overcome that?
No, sir, we have not cut programs. What we have cut, though, is one of the biggest items, which is a little better than $1.4 million, was what we were estimating the health insurance cost to increase.
Okay.
That was the biggest reduction in the expenditure side. Now, the biggest increase on the revenue side, obviously, was the little bit of money we have in fringe, which I apologize, I did not mention.
Right.
All the details are in this green book once again.
Right.
I believe we had added 700, and I don't recall the exact number, 700 some odd $1,000 to our fringe benefits
Right.
line, and some money to the EFA line.
So as a follow-up to that, basically, you had projected that the fringe benefits were going to increase 7.44% last time.
And that was based on what happened the current year, because we hadn't gotten any word, so that we were trying to do a worst
Right.
case.
Right, I understand. But, and then it actually, your projection now is 5.14% increase in fringe benefits now because you've gotten better data.
A little bit different. I think we're talking about a couple of different things. The 7.4% increase that I was talking about was on health insurance only,
Oh, okay.
on those employer costs.
Right.
We've lowered those. But I think what you're talking about is that our fringe benefits in total have increased about 5.14% based on that.
Okay, this is where I was going with this. I know because there's been a big push in the industry, especially construction industries, to keep employees healthier. Okay, and to do that, there's all sorts of methods. I know places that we work even have workout centers and things like that. We have, 2,700 employees?
Roughly.
Okay, is there incentives with the state, and I realize that they run their health insurance, and it increases we're faced with whatever it is, right?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, it's a one-size-fits-all. It goes to everybody. In other words, if the state has something to do with some department, it's running awfully high in its insurance, but it's all lumped together and distributed to everybody, all the way across the system, right?
Yes, sir.
So if we were to affect our health by doing more healthy things, would we get any kind of benefit back to us from doing that?
Excuse me, I'm not aware of anything in this particular case that would do that
I
with
mean,
the
what I'm
state.
saying is, suppose our losses are less than the.
But they're looking at the state as a
Okay.
whole, so I don't know how much our district could do.
Right, I understand. That's the point I was making is that there's got to be some way to put a check on this. And so The only way I know how to do it is let the insurance world start putting downward pressure on people to be healthier. Anyway, that's just one aside to this, but I was just trying to figure out what happened to the $4.2 million. I mean, how did we get to that point? And I think you've,
Well, and I've also gotten a better, once we looked at the local, because I was not given any type of increase in local revenue originally, because I just didn't have enough data.
Right.
After we've looked at it now, you can see that we've got approximately about a $1 million increase in our local revenue expected for next year, too, just based on the value of a mill growing.
okay.
At least in Lexington County. I can't say that for Richland County right now. I don't have
So
enough
did the
data.
value of the mill change too?
It hasn't changed. The value of a mill hasn't changed, but there's some growth in the value of a mill that, right now, I'm trying to base it on what our actual collections are to see what that is. So I've got more data to look at to see where we are currently, which I think will come in higher than what we had anticipated this year. And going forward, trying to carry that forward into next year.
Okay, I won't hog up the floor, but I have one other question.
Oh, go right ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, is there been, I mean, to me, this $200 million is a lot of money. I mean, and what I'm interested in is, I'll put it this way, that I'm interested in trying to save money so that the millage would go down in a way. I mean, I realize that we got to have what we got to have, but what efforts are done to, and this might not be your department, I may be asking the wrong guy, but I trust what you're going to tell me, so, but what efforts are there to find ways that aren't, driven for everything to balance out? In other words, if we could put $2 million back in the pot because we figured out a better way to skin the cat, is any efforts toward that?
Absolutely there is. I mean, we've made a lot of efforts. I think one of the reasons that, and whether or not I'll be able to come up with all of them off the top of my head, I don't know.
I'm not trying to
But one thing that that I think, and the reason you're seeing me come up here without looking at any type of millage increases, because of some of the efforts. We're making a concerted effort in the energy department, especially right now. And I think because of our employees buying into what we're trying to do, we've seen significant savings there. That's how we're able to direct more money to the classrooms. We've looked at some of the contracts that we have now, what we can do to save funds there. We've actually brought some things in-house if it's cheaper for us to do it in-house than it is. Now, I'm only talking from the operations standpoint, but that's really all I can speak of. But we've done some of that. So we're constantly trying to come up with ways to save dollars so that we can redirect them to the classroom.
I mean, I was maybe unfair to you earlier in the year when I was talking about capital budgets, and what the point I was trying to make was that, we need to, I think we need to spend more on things like energy efficient lighting and so forth, so that there's a big return on investment on that.
Absolutely.
And that's what scares me about using up all of our 8% money, for example, on things, and not having as much money as we need to look into the future to get those returns on investments. And those points were, I was trying to ask you that, and I apologize for not prefacing. I was asking you about time value of money, and if we used a certain, timeline that started in 2010, and when we get to 2024, that dollar in 2024 is not what we had in 2013. And so, we're actually putting less and less money into the items, that would give us a better return on investment, and that doesn't seem, that's why I was asking you those questions, okay?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because, as we go through and some of these things that you see on our 5-year capital plan, we're always looking at energy. Obviously, anytime you do HVAC, it's going to be more efficient.
Right.
But as we replace some of these items, we're also replacing lighting
Right.
and ceilings and all that in schools too, which has really helped cut down on some of our electric costs. The year before we opened the new Chapin Middle School, we spent I forget how much in electricity that year. Well, we decided, and at the time, LED lighting the pricing wasn't where it is now, but we did a $200,000 change order and did LED lighting all throughout that new school. We opened that new school, and our actual energy use that next year was almost exactly the same as it was the prior year, and we had an additional school online. So we have done some things that are really, I think, trying to do exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, well, I was trying to give you a compliment on that. And I just
Well, thank you.
I wanted you to know that I wasn't all critical, so.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Cates?
Mr. Richardson, it seems, excuse me, I don't know why I'm tongue-tied tonight, but when 88% of the budget is salaries and fringe, if I'm reading that correct, right at 88%, it's really hard without changing programs or increasing class size or, I mean, there's not a lot for us to save there. It's the other 12% of the budget, and where you're talking about energy cost and some of those kind of things. So we do have, when we look at the budget as a whole, it's like how can you not cut X number of dollars? And really and I may be just oversimplifying it, which I tend to do, but it's really the 12% that gives us the room to look for places to save and to improve our operations.
In this particular case, that's exactly right. Unfortunately, I mean, we are human resource driven, so that's where the majority of our costs are. And I think if you look back at what happened back when the economy tanked, a lot of districts, including this one, saw their class sizes go up because that's really the only place you have.
And I also appreciate the board's commitment on the recommendation of Dr. Melton and you and the executive staff that we recognize that the state's requiring a 4% raise for teachers, but you know we value all of our employees and have made the commitment to give that raise beyond what was required and budgeted by the state, and give that 4% raise to all of our staff. So again, I think that in so many ways we try to lead the state, and that I appreciate the effort and the commitment that's gone in to making that happen.
Ms. Hammond?
Thank you. I would like you to recap for teachers about they will get the step, and then what's if the Senate goes through with it, is it still the 4% raise?
That's pretty much locked in now, the 4%.
That's what I thought. I know I heard it, but I'm thinking I would like to recap it for teachers. And I agree with Mr. Cates. I'm glad we also value other employees with the cost of living. But I did know that teachers are, as you know, it's on the forefront right now about teachers. But I just thought it was good to recap. So they would get the cost of living, and I know new teachers, that first year salary they're working on. But I'm looking at like our employees that have been here. They're going to get, if they haven't overreached the number of years to get the step, they're going to get that. Plus, would they get an average of 6% in the end?
On average, that's what you're looking at for a teacher, for teachers in general.
Right, I'm
the
making
step,
a general statement. I know some would.
but not every teacher will get that much.
I got you.
They each will get at least 4% plus whatever that step happens to be.
Okay.
When you look at the first 4 sales, however, because of what the state's done with trying to boost those salaries to a it takes us to over $38,000 for a
Right.
beginning teacher. Those teachers will see quite a bit of an increase.
That's right. And then my other question, if I might, Ms. Hutchinson, I'll be finished, but this was really interesting to me, and I think it would be to teachers in the public, because sometimes they ask this. You've got on page, well, it doesn't have a page, but it's under the fee schedules in our packet. I mean, I was just looking, and I realized with the number of years, the salary goes up. But just for sake of example, I'm going to take the person that's got the 14 years. I'm going to go over to that one. We have the, like, head basketball coach and head, varsity cheerleading, and all of them except for varsity head football coach. And at the bottom, it says, paid from administrator's schedule. So you would just go back to that schedule? And
Yes.
is there any particular reason? Now, I'm not picking on football. I love football. My son played. But I'm just trying to get a good answer why that's separate. And then when I look under that 14 years, I'm wondering, most of those, I looked at all of them. Most of them are, anywhere from 3,400 to 4,200. They're pretty much very equitable, except basketball varsity head, and that's 7,625. I'm just trying to get, who determines this and how's it determined? Because I've had that question before, about stipends or whatever you call it, where somebody's willing to be a coach, or how we determine that. And I see here, it does go up with number of years experience. So I know I just asked two questions, but how do we come up with the salary schedule? Because there are a lot of people that ask me that. And then why is football under the administrators?
I'm going to deflect that to, to Dr. Jakes.
Okay,
The Office of Human Resources works closely with finance, and we actually are responsible for the salary, the supplement schedules, and setting the years of experience, interpreting that. So we work hand in hand, but ultimately, these particular items are approved as part of the budget. And so what we've done recently is look specifically at all of our supplements, all of our stipends, to ensure that we're looking at board-approved supplements, which would mean that they're included in this packet, that we're looking at the market rate, that we're making sure that that amount that we're paying is reasonable with what we would expect to pay. And so we have looked at that specifically when you think about clubs and activities. Recently, we've made some pretty big adjustments to those where we've gone in and ensured that you receive a more equitable distribution. When you look specifically at athletics, and that's the page that you were referring to that talks specifically about these coaching positions, this is something that has been in place for some time. We haven't modified this recently, but it is based on a comparison across the state, across the Midlands. And so at this point, as we continue to review this, it continues to appear to be best practice. This is equitable with other areas. We do want to ensure that we're able to recruit and retain in these particular positions. And the head varsity football coach has been, again, we haven't revised this recently, but it has been part of that salary schedule. So that is the way that it was introduced at one point in time. And so there never has been a rationale or a reason to take that out of the salary schedule and to simply make it a supplement.
And do you think and this is just me saying this, do you think it's because varsity basketball and varsity football are two of our sports that you would have more people that attend those events than some of the others? Even though those other coaches work just as hard, it's more of a high visible, I guess, a draw.
There are a variety of reasons. Back to the market, when we do analysis, when we pull information across the state from other districts, again, we look at the market rate. So what we know is that in order to attract and retain coaches in these particular areas, this has been what the market bears. And so traditionally, we could go back historically and look at a variety of reasons. In fact, when we looked at club supplements, we realized that, at one point in time, we may have won national awards in a particular extracurricular activity. So when you know the history, sometimes you are able to make those comparisons, but the best information I can give you is that we do review this based on the market.
And I would just like to say, I know how hard, it doesn't matter whether they're the softball coach or the varsity football coach. We know that they all work. Just think this was a good place to have it explained how we want to remain competitive and that you do look at the market.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so that I can answer that to how it's chosen, and I appreciate your answer.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Lovelace.
One more question and the inquisition is over. But Dr. Jakes, when, one of the things that I noticed that you brought to us was that we were using outside sources for substitute teachers, for example. And, we're very complimentary toward you for that because, it's working out well, I think. The state has given us a lot of unfunded mandates, and they're not funding parts of our payroll taxes and insurance, and they're not funding parts of our of employees' health or retirement funds and things like that. So they're obviously driving us toward having fewer employees is what they're trying to do, or either we have to pay the difference with local revenues. All right, my question to you is there other avenues that we have approached, or ideas? I know that this, that this board would have to do that, but are you working toward those kinds of things to where we could use other sources rather than hiring people, because we're not getting reimbursed for everything it costs to hire somebody?
That is not something at this point we've explored. We are moving forward with our traditional practice of hiring and employing individuals to teach and to perform other duties. So the substitute process, Kelly Services, has been the only initiative that I'm aware of where we've looked at that type of outsourcing.
And you're commended for that. I just was wondering, are we doing anything, because the way I see it, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I see that those unfunded mandates will eventually be unsustainable for us. It will soak up more of our local revenues than we can allow, so that we won't be able to grow in the fashion that we want to. So I was just trying to find some other ways that we would have sustainable ways to give raises and things like that don't have anything to do with the state. I mean, I'm looking at trying to figure out, because I don't think they're going to give us what we want. I mean, I just have that feeling that's not going to happen, and probably everybody does too. So, but anyway, that was the question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gates.
The academic fees, an academic fee, if a student is on free and reduced, are those fees adjusted, the academic fees?
Yes, they are.
And the athletic fees are not?
That's not, I think they are at each school, but that's been left up to each individual school.
Okay, well, that is an important distinction, that one is driven by the district and then one is driven by the principal and the AD.
That's correct.
Have,
And I'm not aware of any students that have not been allowed to
oh,
play.
I agree. I would say, at least in my experience at IRMO, if a student desires to play, that opportunity's been given. It does make it difficult for those ADs and coaches, though, to balance how those fees get adjusted. I was just hoping maybe we could, and I don't know if it's possible where we are in this budget, to estimate the cost of dealing with athletic fees in the same way we do with academic fees, so that there was a district standard versus different standards in different schools. And I don't know what that impact might be. It may be that's not possible, but.
Well, I do think, and I'll use Irmo High School as an example, I don't think you'll see much change there because they do exactly what we're talking about, and they got a higher percentage of those type of students that would qualify for lesser fees, obviously. But I also think the same is true for each of the high schools. And if I'm not mistaken, some of the booster clubs are actually have scholarship programs to help pay some of those fees for the students who can't afford it as well.
It also puts a family in a position to have to come ask. And, you know, I understand the difference between co-curricular and extracurricular. I get it, that, you know, that there's no mandate that requires a student to play a sport. But if we value the impact of athletics on our students, the leaders they become, the effort that they understand that effort is demanded to experience success. I think that's why we have athletics, is so our students can learn the lessons of athletics and not just for physical activity or something for us to host. I mean, we invest a lot in our athletic facilities, staffs, infrastructure, insurance, transportation, and I'm just troubled by the fact that those student athletes that are in need are put sometimes in awkward positions, and we don't expect a student that's taking a science class that needs a resource that the fees attached to, or music. We don't expect them to come say, hey, I need help. So I have some concern about the way we're doing that.
Mr. Cates, I very much appreciate you bringing that up, and the board discussed that at the last meeting at Valentine Elementary. And since then, I've had the opportunity to talk with those coaches that I've bumped into. I have not scheduled a meeting necessarily. The piece that Mr. Richardson nor I, our coaches, nor our high school principals can predict is how many students choose not to participate because they can't pay. So those that have come forward and said, yes, I'd like to play, but I need assistance with pay, Mr. Richardson and I are both told that there are plans that are presented to that student and or family. Sometimes the plan is not actually completed. Sometimes it may never get started. You may agree to what that payment plan may be, and I'll compare it with our insurance plan when we originated with our technology insurance, we called it, and then we changed it to a technology fee and waived those fees for students that were identified as free reduced lunch services. So we recognize the fact that what we report may be a small invalid sample, but we really don't know how to capture the information from that. Based on our conversations, we can't even project what it may be except on the current participating number of athletes and how many people, and one coach said to me, how many may take advantage of it if we put it out there? So we can't predict that either. So if you all were to charge us to create a budget not to exceed a certain amount to be a scholarship fund to assist students or whatever that may look like, but Mr. Richardson, I will compliment any booster that has reached out or any principal that's reached out with issues. We have tried to help find them a way to rectify the things that they're concerned about, whether it's a creative plan that a student may pay $5 incrementally, whatever that may be, to make sure that the student has a chance to play. We certainly understand the value of athletics and how many of our students get to go on to the next level with scholarships because of the programs in School District 5. We would just look to the board for some guidance as to what might you all think, because that's not been done before in School District 5, to open the opportunity, because there can be a barrier, particularly since we're looking at going up to $65 rather than $50. But as Mr. Richardson said last time, and for the community who may not have been there, to make sure you capture it, this was at the request of high school principals who have athletic sports to make sure that we can try to support the price of the increasing cost of competing.
And I think that's, it's $65 a sport. So, and I know we have a lot of, well, it's hard to quantify, but I know quite a few two-sport athletes and families with multiple children, and I would just like to see us come up with, I mean, I don't know how you project, okay, what's the impact, how do we set a $10 fee for X class? How do we know that covers the expenses? Do you calculate, well, we have a certain percentage of free and reduced where that's going to get paid? Or did we just say, okay, we'll waive that for free and reduced, and we think everybody else will cover the cost? I mean, it doesn't feel like there's a grand formula as much as we want to recover some costs, but we're committed to providing quality experience for all our students. So we don't need to keep on that.
Well, and
I'll trust that you'll bring something back that we can can look at
And
and
I was
talk
just going
about.
to suggest that perhaps at the officers' meeting, we can talk about, adding a request to the administration to look into this, and, which I'm sure they'll do. So if you can remember about that. Mr. White?
I just wanted to add observation, and Mr. Richardson, you can add something here too, but, back to Mr. Lovelace's, your comment about trying to find ways to fund raises. I would just share with you, this budget we have this year, I mean, and you can echo, Mr. Richardson, what your view is, but it's a very rare day we sit down at the budget table and Mr. Richardson says, I think I'm going to be able to close this gap with no increase in millage or major cuts in programs or other services to do that. I'd say by far more than a majority or 2/3, we start off struggling with significant numbers. We have to close the gap. And at the period in time where they changed, where the millage was capped, it made it more difficult. And you probably heard me talk before about when Act 288 back in 2005 or whenever it was enacted, the CFOs of school districts used to collaborate and figure out how we're going to survive this. And different districts with different politics would go ahead and capture that band of revenue. And it's a layer or band every time they get a millage increase. But the reality is what I've observed in the last, and some of them got much more ahead of us, which means they have the ability to do things like give teachers raises perhaps, or at least they don't have to worry as much as we have to worry at times. But I think one of the things that was clear to me a few years ago when we did that analysis of the step increases, that most years your ability to cover your step increase, which we don't have any discretion. We had discretion when the economy crashed. They gave us a year or two. You can barely cover it by a millage increase. So if you start off in a deficit, you have to go to that, if nothing else, to cover that statutory millage step increase. But looking at the numbers here, salary increases and cost of living, $7.9 million. I think I would echo what Mr. Cates was saying, that with 88% of the budget being employees, and even a substantial amount of that, I don't know the exact percentage of those employees are teachers, it's going to be hard to self-fund off of their dollars, even with 12% being capital and bringing utility costs. I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm just telling you, my reality is we're very lucky to have this budget this year. There was an infusion of resources from the state. But to give teachers raises periodically, consistently, the money has to come from the state. We're handcuffed locally. There were days when you had the ability to fund a certain, whatever, there were no limits on the millage, but it was still just these huge battles. And I've sat here many times and watched teachers in tears, or principals, basically conceding, yes, if you cut this program, we'll survive. But it was stuff that we were trying to balance a budget and limit those millage increases. So what I would suggest to you is what we really need, and I'm assuming you're not going to recommend a millage increase with this kind of budget, but we're giving up a band, we're giving up a layer of revenue that you'll never be able to go back more than pick up 2 years in retrospective, and we had to do that one time. But the more normal budget is you sit down and our costs have gone up on average 5 or 6%, including that step increase in there. And you got several $1 million you got to fund out of the gates. And you watch, how much we were talking earlier, they went at $2 on the base student cost, what they're going to pay us. And, if you're not already covering just the normal inflationary price increases that we don't have control over, then, we get into some very perilous situations. So, all I'm trying to convey is to really talk about funding teacher raises on a periodic basis. You got to do what they're planning on doing Wednesday. You got to get down there to the General Assembly and make the message heard, because we're never going to be able to deliver it with the compounding that comes from, particularly things like statutory step increases every single year. And you never get ahead. And we've been trying that for all 16 years I've been on the board.
Ms. Gardner, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, but that's all right.
No, go ahead.
It's like 5 minutes ago. As far as what I wanted to say, I'll be going back to.
That's all
we were
right.
Talking about
Go
something
ahead.
else. I have to think about it, sorry. What were we talking about? The athletic fees. I will just say, as a parent, from a parent perspective, and having children who are in more than one sport, you know, having to pay the fee, it hurts a little bit, but I will say that the experience that we've had, and it might be the procedure, policy, whatever, of the school district or the school itself, I was never asked for that money up front. It was always after we were involved, which was good, because that didn't mean that my child was going to participate based on whether or not we could pay the fee. And then we were given options. We were, from my school. And, you know, so I think, I understand the need for the fee. So that's my parent perspective, but I appreciate that there's not this, it's not, it doesn't exclude anybody from the schools that my son participates and my daughter. So that's just, I've never had to ask for assistance personally, and I don't know other people have. I think they keep it very good and confidential, but I just know that nobody's been told that they couldn't participate because they couldn't pay the fee. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Good 2 cents. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, we have the motion on the floor to approve, give first reading approval of proposed general fund budget for fiscal year 2019-20. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, that passes 6-0. The next item on our discussion agenda, just for the audience who may be following along with us with the agenda, at the beginning of the meeting at 5:30, in the approval of the agenda, an amendment was made to move item 3B to the discussion agenda to be the first item on the discussion agenda. So we will be hearing from Mr. Mike Gallagher about the options for bond issuance and debt service repayment. And depending on how long that goes, I think Mr. Cates may be prepared to make a motion to move items
18 and 19.
18 and 19 for first reading, for discussion, first reading approval for the next meeting. So just,
Did we vote on the first reading of the budget?
Yeah.
It's getting late, so
I
my
know,
brain
I know,
is shutting
yeah.
down.
yeah, exactly. Well, and that's why.
As we get set up for Mr. Gallagher, and as he comes forward, I think I'd like to go ahead and offer the motion that we move items 18 and 19 as printed in the agenda to first reading status for our May 20 meeting.
And Ms. Hammond seconds that, she was
Ready.
ready. Okay, first and second motion, all in favor, please raise your hands. All opposed, and that passes 6-0.
Not that we are just giving you an open-ended time now, Mr. Gallagher.
No, not at all.
But I do apologize for holding you. I kept seeing you up there, and I think, well, he got the short end. He was going to be at 5:30, and he ended up at 9:30.
It's
So,
quite all right. It's a
thank you.
pleasure to be here with y'all this evening. One of the good things is it's nice to, every year or so, just take a look at the debt profile of the district. I know we got a couple new faces on the board, which I hadn't had a chance to be here and present to you, so I think it'd be good to go through that. So in your pockets, there is a building program update. And on the first page, that shows the debt obligations that the school district has outstanding right now. There's the 2010 qualified school construction bonds. That was one of those that was done during the era, that was done during the era period where this is one of those tax credit bonds that the federal government picks up the interest on for the school district. And you receive that via debt credit. That's why the borrowing rate on that is shown as 0. You've got 2012B. That was one of the final pieces of your referendum that you had many years back. It's got a balance outstanding right now of $89,085,000. Borrowing rate on that was 2.83%. It is refundable in March of 2022, but the callable maturities of that have a rate of 3.54%. So that'd be something that, as we get closer to 2022, we'll monitor the market and see if it's efficient for you to refinance that issue. 2013A, REF, that stands for refunding. That was one of the first bond issues that we did under, I believe it was 2008 referendum, that we refunded those bonds. And they have a rate of 2.21%, and they go out to 2028. And then finally, we got the 2015B refunding bonds, which have $55,185,000. Those are not callable until March of 2025. If we flip over to the next page, this is just a graphical representation of all the principal and interest payments on a calendar basis. You'll see that what is in blue is what is locked in and set, and those are the required payments that they have. And the only way those are going to change is when we meet those various call dates. If it's economically feasible to refund those bonds, we could refinance them and possibly lower those payments. You've got an area in there that is green. That is a bond issue that we sold just last week and will be closing next month to fund your 8% capital program. And then you'll notice that the peach color there, that is what we've got layered in for your annual maintenance and technology program to fund that. If we flip over to the next page, the debt structure report, you'll see that all the bond payments aggregated together there in column B. We have the estimated payment for 2019A in column C, and column F is the amount that you have listed for annual technology maintenance. That would be your 8% money, what you have each year that will be coming available for you, and just put that in as a placeholder amount to know that you have it. And that way it feeds into the next page, which is our millage cash flow report. Interesting to note, you'll see from 2012 through 18, each of those years have a little asterisk beside them. That means that the information in the budgeted value mill, that's actually the actual collected value of a mill. And the district has seen very good growth in the value of a mill. From 2012, we were $451,000, and as of 2018, we were $479,000. So we've seen, stable, steady growth. Going forward, you'll notice we only have 1% growth in there. Tried to be as conservative as possible. Last thing we want to do is have that millage fluctuate, and there's always items that are beyond everybody's control. Richland County, when they did their reassessment in 14-15, they rolled back quite a bit when they did that reassessment due to the drop in values, and I think some of that was impacts felt from the big recession back in 2008. State sources, that's going to be your homestead reimbursement monies that come in. The total debt service is what is transferred over from the prior page of what your aggregate payments are. We work off of targets, and that's one of the things the district has had is a target debt service millage is kind of where you want to see that debt service millage number be, and that'll feed into a little bit more of the discussion here in a few minutes. And you'll see the millage levied in the prior periods. That's the actual amount that was levied, and then going forward, that's what the requirement would be. And then you'll see remaining millage. Those would be extra dollars that you would have available if you wanted to solve each year to be at that target millage. Page 5 in the handout is your constitutional debt limit in the state of South Carolina. The school district has the ability that they can issue up to 8% of the total assessed value. Total assessed value is estimated at $513,324,250. That translates to $41,065,940. We do have the issue of 2019A that's just under $10 million that's been issued. So we have approximately $31,138,000 in debt limit available. I believe we've had a resolution approved previously to issue up to $30 million. And so the final page that's in the handout is different scenarios for what would be the millage impact for different repayment terms for that $30 million. We've talked about whether a 3-year, which would put millage at 75.4 mils, 5 years, which would be 67.8 mils, 7 years, which would be at 63, and 10 years, which would be at 60.8 mils. Couple things to consider with each of those terms. The further you go out, while it does reduce the millage, it does have a higher interest rate, interest expense associated with that. Because I know when Mr. Richards and I were speaking earlier, he said, you know, can you put that into perspective for me so we can understand that? And so over a 10-year period, you pay back over just a little over $8 million in interest expense. If you went with a 5-year term, you'd pay $3.7 million in interest. So you have to look at that. And the other big thing is looking at where your mill rate is and how does that fit in with all of your, your bigger capital improvement program funding, the needs that you'll have coming down the road.
Mr. Gallagher, I didn't quite hear, you said that the 10-year financing term was how many million, and the next one was 3.7?
It'd be 8. It'd be
8
just
million.
over 8 million.
And did you come up with the other two with a 3 and 5 year?
I didn't do a 3, but I did the 5 was 3.7, and a 7-year was 5.6.
Oh, 7, okay. Okay, questions for Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Cates?
Well, actually, just as a point of information for the public, normally this would have been online, but because it was an executive session item that we amended this afternoon, it was not online prior to our board meeting, but it will be online, I would suspect, in the morning. So this presentation, I know for some of the public, they were trying to follow along. The presentation will be online where our normal board packet information is online under our board meeting information for tomorrow.
Thank you. Mr. Lovelace?
Mr. Gallagher, on page 2 of that's the graph that you showed us with the peach color and all that stuff? Mm-hmm. Okay, ours is in black and white. But, the millage that's shown up there, starting at year 2020 through year 2024, the 67.8, 67.8, and down to 64.3. Does that reflect, are you following me?
No,
Actually,
53.8.
our page 2 and your page 2 is,
You gotta look on the screen, Ken.
yeah, it's
You
on
got
the,
a different one.
yeah, our page 2 is distributed, Mr. Lovelace is different. The millage numbers are,
All right, if you go, can,
I've just been told you have the wrong information in your packet. I think we had done one that had the 5 years embedded in it.
that's what I was
And
gonna
this
ask.
is not, what you have in your packet is what the district has outstanding today.
Right.
And so that's the information that's
Well,
on the
that's what I was
screen as
going to
well.
ask you, that was my question.
Yeah, right now, we're at 53.8 mils, or we're at 54.8 this year, projected to be at 54.8 next year. And then, of course, that'll obviously depend on what direction and what is done with the $30 million issue that's contemplated.
Okay, so help me get this straight. Now, you sold the bonds last week for the $30 million.
No, sir, we have not sold the 30 million. We did,
I mean,
we
you-
did the 8% issue.
Okay. Okay.
We did,
Just-
we did,
ju-
we did,
just-
we did the your
$10
annual
million
cap-
for-
Yes, sir,
okay.
annual capital maintenance, not
Okay,
the.
so the cash flow won't actually come online till when? What,
The-
the extra additional cash flow for the $30 million?
The $30 million issue is pending direction from the board as to what term you want, and then those bonds would be issued sometime before millage is set this year.
Okay, so my question was, and I think this is valid, just depending on which year it comes online, because all of these things on your graph show, the one that you gave us shows 67.8 mils.
Yeah.
And it goes up from 54.8 mils, so I'm assuming that the 5-year scenario is embedded in this. So
Yeah.
it's a 13 mil increase over 5 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so 13 mils over 5 years. What portion of that comes from local revenues? Do you know that?
Everything.
Everything, that's what I thought.
All of it.
So if you take the 13 mils times the, was it $470-something thousand a mil? Isn't that what you said earlier?
Value of a mill is 479.
Right now, it's 479,000.
479.
Okay. So that tells us that the additional debt service we would be paying for.
That year.
For that year. Okay. And then it apparently looks like that some of this 2008 bond referendum money dies out maybe 2024. Is that what we're looking at?
It's wrapped around.
Okay.
It's wrapped for a level payment. So if you'll look at the graph, you'll notice that everything stays fairly flat. If you look at the blue, all the blue is all the old referendum debt.
Okay. So how long does that go on?
That goes out until 2032.
2032. Okay.
There'll be a step down in 29, and then in 32, there'll be a further drop down.
Okay, so what you're laying out here is scenarios, the various scenarios that this graph that I have could go as high as 75 mils if we paid it off in 3 years, or it could go as low as, I don't,
60.8 if you went 10.
60.8 if we paid it off in 10 years.
Correct.
So our decision that we have to make is, okay, you know, as how much the taxpayer can stand, I guess, and then how long that we want to go so we can conserve dollars. So, I mean, that's what you're laying out here for us, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's a balancing act between what you want to spend in interest versus where you want your millage to be.
And if we don't spend the $30 million, if we spent $25 million, those numbers would go down, right?
No, sir. Once you sold the bonds are sold.
Okay. So can we use that bond money for anything else?
That would be a great legal question that we'd want to ask the lawyers.
Okay.
Yeah, I am sure that your resolution was written so that it included all capital projects approved by the board, but I don't have a copy of the resolution, and I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to tell us that. I just wondered if it were generally accepted accounting procedure.
Usually there's sufficient flexibility if there's other projects that the board would have that you would have the ability to do
So
that.
going back to my questions to Mr. Richardson earlier, if we wanted to do additional lighting in other schools, we could take that money that we hadn't spent and use that so we could get a better return on investment from our.
And even on the lighting projects, anything like that it's equipment, you could do an equipment acquisition or equipment financing or energy savings agreement.
Right.
There's a variety of other financing tools that are available that are outside of the 8% debt limit that could be used for projects such as that.
Is there any kind, I know I'm hogging the floor here again, but is there any kind of rebate that the federal government gives for energy efficiency and things like that?
I'm not aware. I was working on a transaction for another school district this past week that had some rebates from Duke Energy that they were looking at. I'm not aware of anything that SCANA, SC&G, Dominion, whatever they want to be called now, that they have available in the Midlands of South Carolina.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Ms. Hammond?
I'm kind of like Mr. Cates. It's getting so late, and this stuff is very important, but it's also a lot, you know. But the 8% value, if I wrote this down, was it 40? What was the amount you gave us?
40 million.
41 million?
41 million.
41 million. That's the available. That's as much as you can.
That's the full debt limit.
Full debt, right. And in that 10 million that we already set aside and we voted on, is that shown in this?
Yes, ma'am. If you
Okay.
look at column C on page 5,
Okay. So if we did, we just have the right in a different vote or a different plan to use more of it. You know, like there would be, if I took the 10 from, I'm just rounding off from the 41 million, we'd have 31 million left that we could borrow against our 8%. Am I correct?
yes, ma'am.
And so now, like I said, the sort of the decision or the thing we've got to look at is the way it's paid back and how quickly it would be available back for our schools to, when we need 8% money for existing needs in every school.
Yes, ma'am.
And that facilities study we saw a few weeks ago was overwhelming with the number of needs our schools have. So it's a lot to think about.
Mr. Cates?
On page 5, the column I, 8% capacity, starting in 2019, is that showing if we borrowed at the debt limit, the schedule in which that 8% capacity is coming back to us?
It does not have that included, but you could, obviously, if it's paid back over a 3-year period, you would recoup.
Basically get a third a year. I mean, I know not exactly.
Not exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to try to balance it out for the
Right.
payments.
So explain to me, so where it says, I'm sorry, I can't. On I, where, let's just pick a year, 2022, it shows 21 million in I. Just explain that to me. Is that the capacity that we will have in 2022?
That's provided you don't issue, this is a baseline before you would
Okay,
issue.
so that
30 million.
is
So this
based
doesn't
on-
have the factored in.
Okay, thank you.
My brain can't do it right now.
Any questions? I have a question. Based on your experience selling bonds, what have you found to be the best plan for paying back a $30 million bond as far as term limits?
As far as 8% debt limit, we tend to like to see it paid back inside of 5 years. That way you're recouping that capacity. If you were to go out 10 years, it just doesn't give you a lot of flexibility. You're recouping some capacity, but you're not getting a lot. You're not getting a lot of that capacity back for other needs that you may have down the road.
And Mr. Richardson, just to follow up on that, how, when you're looking at our budget, how do you see the 3-year, 5-year, how that will impact our budget and your best recommendation, since you're the numbers guy?
Excuse me, I don't really see it impacting our budget, but from my standpoint now, I'm not having to vote on millage increase. Obviously, the shorter the term, the better, as far as I see it. But 3 or 5 years, I'm very comfortable with.
Okay. Mr. White?
Are we going to, is the action item, I know it's not tonight, but when is it?
May 20th.
When y'all did the first presentation, I think it may have been a year or so ago, or last summer perhaps, and I actually saved that somewhere. I got notes on it. I was trying to find it, but I didn't get time before I got out of the house this morning. But it would be helpful if y'all showed us the 3, 5, maybe 7 for comparison with, I think you had a column in the far right last time that showed the 8% capacity being reestablished.
Mm-hmm.
So that people can see that in real time when we start talking about that, because it is how quickly do you get your 8% capacity back when you're on a 3-year, 5-year? Is that something y'all can do?
Yeah, we can easily do that. We can run this where we give you all 3 or all 4 different scenarios side by side.
Do that.
You can look at the exact same information 4 different ways.
And show a column. I think you had it in the far right last time. I mean, the very first time we got it, it was there. But it showed the 8% capacity being reestablished as we paid it off. And I think that's the thing that, as a board, we can understand, okay, because the 8% is there for contingencies and capital emergencies and things. And so I think it'll show us how quickly we're gathering our capacity back.
We can update this and give you all, if you want all 4 scenarios, we can do that for all 4 scenarios.
I think that'd
for
be
you.
helpful, just to have a side-by-side comparison.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Gallagher?
You can go home.
All right. Thank you once again for being here and for staying so late. We apologize for that, but thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
And before we adjourn, I just want to announce that our next board meeting is a special call meeting on next Monday, May 6th, and that's to select an auditing firm, and everyone should have received a packet at your house. And then the next regularly scheduled meeting is May the 20th, and that will be at Spring Hill High School. Saying that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, question.
Oh,
I
yes.
just had a question about the special call. It is in the morning, correct, Beth?
Yes, 8:30? 8:30.
And let me ask you, in the past, we have had it where a committee saw the presentation, but this is the whole board, the way this is going to be. And I've got
Right.
the material, and I've looked over it.
Right.
I will not be able to attend. It's just not the right time to ask
Sure.
off.
Sure.
But I apologize.
And if you have any comments or questions
Okay,
you
I
want
could
to
read over it
submit.
and send it to, would I send it to Robert or send it to Dr. Melton?
Yeah, go ahead and send it to Robert.
Okay.
And copy Dr. Melton if you would. That would be great.
I'm not going to be, I'm going to be working that day, so,
On May 6th.
yeah, I mean, I got a pretty busy calendar, but I just want to make sure y'all, if
We
Jan's
have a
not going to be
quorum
there.
committed.
Yeah, we have a quorum,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think.
And Ms. Hutchinson, will it be a rating system? I'm just curious since I can't, I mean, how?
Let me ask Mr. Richardson. I'm not sure.
You know, like, I mean, I've been on the committee before, and then I've done it with the whole board, but I didn't know whether we actually rate them and listen to a presentation. Since I can't come, I'd like to know.
We've included the information in the packets. Originally, we did not know how many firms we would have reply to our RFP. So we were going to go through the rating system to try to narrow it down for the board, but we had only 4 firms submit a proposal. So that's going to be completely up to the board whether or not they want to go through that formal process or just choose from the 4 when they present.
And I have one more question. Of those 4 firms, like I said, and I looked through them, I didn't read everything. Is one of those the one we use now?
Yes, McGregor.
Yeah, that's what, I just wanted to know if that was what, okay, thank you, that helps me. Now,
Okay.
I'll shut up.
Nah, that's all right. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I'm so moved.
I can't believe there was hesitation.
I know it, we couldn't think, it's really, our brain's gone.
Exactly, Ms. Hammond.
I know it, I know it.
Oh, yes. We have a
Drop
safety,
off.
we have a safety issue, so, and Mr. Lovelace seconds that. All in favor, please raise your hand. That passes 6-0. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, staff and administrators, for staying so late.